malusieńkie dzicie. Jakbyś było dobre, nie lulaliby cię. Jakbyś było dobre, nie lulaliby cię.
So welcome everyone to the lecture of Jakub Kacprzak, archaeologist, a County Clare Museum volunteer, and we're going to talk today about the Polish transformation, changes in Poland, economic, political and social perspective. And we've just received an apology from Mr. Ambassador that he cannot attend, but I think we'll be able to enjoy it anyway. Thank you so much.
Diye w akordzie. Jakub Kacprzak is Anam Dom, is myślę County Clare Museum volunteer cataloger. And today I am going to tell you about change in Poland, the change which happened in 1989 and after. After Second World War, Poland, abandoned by its allies, was left as a prey to the most oppressive system ever. After that, the satraps have changed, but the system remained, and that was for many, many years. And soon after, in 1989, a change appeared, but this change had its roots in the previous movements. Before I will say, and we have several changes in Poland. We can put them as economical, political, social, spiritual, and industrial. It has all begun in 1979, when Bishop Karol Wojtyła was elected Pope John Paul II. And in 1979, he went for a pilgrimage in Poland. Now, Poland was suffering from the most oppressive system, the system which was atomizing the society, which was bringing people apart. Nobody felt free to speak for himself. If you thought one thing, you were wise to keep those things to yourself. In this situation, he came on his first pilgrimage. It brought millions of people together. Millions. The same thing happened in Dublin and Phoenix Park when a quarter of a nation came to listen to him. And those millions were gathering not only to pray with him, but to listen to him. And then an understanding appeared. An understanding that we are not alone. I am not alone. There are millions of people around me who think the same. When he left, those millions followed him, not only like here, but followed him mentally, thinking about a change. And soon a movement appeared, a new movement, in a frame which was the only possible to exist in a socialist country like Poland then was. It was a trade union. Now, in 1980, in August 1980, I witnessed the meeting which established Solidarity. Personally, I was then 2.5 years old, and I was there with my aunt grandmother. And I don't remember any of the talks because I didn't witness the talks. I was sitting outside playing with grass or whatever. But I was there. And if somebody would look probably in secret police archives, I will be, there is a photo of an elderly woman with a boy. This movement appeared in 1980. It was a huge change. The spirit of that days, among those who did really took a part in it, they always remember that as they were on the edge of something new. This movement had two main leaders. One was Andrzej Gwiazda and the second one was Lech Wałęsa. And soon, in a 38 million country like Poland, 10 million citizens were part of Solidarity. This movement was a huge threat to the existing system, with a huge danger to the current rulers. But how can you stop 10 million people? Well, one way they found out was tanks. And this gentleman, General Jaruzelski, who made a coup on the 13th of December 1981 and seized all the power in Poland. He was a very powerful person before that, and after December 89, he was the sole ruler. This thing put Poland in an enormous crisis. The reaction of Western countries from the other side of the Iron Curtain was strong. They put retortions on Poland. Basically, no trade was coming in and no trade was coming out. And in that situation, Poland, with tanks on streets and political opposition put in prison, was facing the biggest economical crisis ever. And here we come to the economical changes. In 1980s, Poland was suffering from the most severe crisis ever. Lack of everything. And that's really everything. You don't have meat, you don't have soap, you don't have cotton, you don't have toilet paper, you have nothing. Everything is sold on coupons or on tickets. Everything is unavailable to buy. If you would take your salary and go to the black market and try to buy meat, your monthly wages can buy you 4 kilograms of red meat. People were literally fighting for goods. Such a humiliation of a whole nation. Imagine that you wake up, you go to work, and then the money which you get for your labor is worth nothing. Humiliation of that is outstanding. But the rulers were not very bothered with that. You know, they were supplied. But in the mid-80s, they faced a different problem. Because the previous satrap of Poland, Edward Gierek, took quite big loans and credits in the Western countries, which they had to be paid in dollars. In mid-80s, because of all restrictions which were put on Polish industry, they were not having enough money to meet a new payment. Polish government was forced to commit into bankruptcy in mid-80s. Now, countries don't bankrupt that easy, but they had no choice. In that dramatic situation, General Jaruzelski appointed this fellow a prime minister. Now, Mieczysław Rakowski, this gentleman here, was a socialist liberal. He was the head journalist of the most liberal newspaper in communist Poland called Polityka. And in this newspaper, he presented loads of new ideas which could make socialism work, which was basically as far as acceptable to the current rulers. He, in the 1988, Mieczysław Rakowski approached Western economists, namely Jeffrey Sachs and George Soros, asking for their help. In the meantime, he appointed a new Minister of Industry. This is Minister Wilczek. Minister Wilczek was a genius. He was a genius just like normally. He taught himself to read and write. He finished primary school in 1 year, and when he was studying on his second year, he became the worker of the Institute of Technology, in which he was still studying. Later, when he finished with his PhD, he became the chairman of the biggest chemical industry in then socialist Poland, and then he had loads of inventions like an ICSI washing powder and others. After that, when he was fed up in the 60s, he became a farmer. And as we know, farming, when you have to pay all your monthly wage for 4 kilograms of red meat, is a good business. This made him one of the richest people in Poland. And he was one of the richest people in Poland in the 80s, in the 90s, and when he died last year. Minister Wilczek prepared he had his own plan of turning Poland from central planning into free market. And he did it with just one law. He convinced General Jaruzelski that one law is able to not suppress all the problems, but to put a good barrier to the lack of products on the market. And he made one law with 55 articles, one of the shortest in Polish history and one of the most efficient. The first, out of those 55 articles, I have two here. Trade is legal, production is legal. And second, the most important one was what is not forbidden is legal. From then on, and I remember that for myself when I was a teenage boy then, all of a sudden, in all towns, small markets appeared, people selling from streets, from beds. They were selling you every single good, which was usually smuggled from some Western countries. So immediately, and this is 1988, still we have socialism, still it is called Polish People's Republic, but we do have goods. Those are not very legal. They are usually smuggled by little smugglers in the suitcases, but you have things which you can buy. After that, it was known that it is not enough. It wasn't enough. Wilczek was able, with his free market reform, and he really brought free market to Poland because before, during his times, Poland was ruled by two laws. One first was his, and second was pre-Second World War trading codex, which was 30 pages. So really free market. But it was only for the small, not for the big industry, not for the country. It was just to supply you a toilet paper. General Jaruzelski knew that this is not going to be enough. This is not going to be enough for a long time because he has to meet the payments to pay to the Paris Society. The only way forward was a drastic reform. But to make this drastic reform, you need to agree with Central Bureau of Polish Laborers' Party. So him and General Kiszczak literally forced the Central Committee of the Communist Party into allowing what was then called pluralism, which meant we allow other movements to exist. And after that, they faced a new thing. Now, we allowed some opposition. What for? We allowed this opposition to take the burden of the changes. Because we allow them the idea was to share the power, preferably with some minor opposition leaders from the church side, as church was the stronghold in the communist Poland. General Kiszczak was very privileged then. He had possibility to choose with whom from the opposition he will speak. The nation did not knew who were the opposition leaders. They were using nicknames, they were using name of war, they were not known to the public. General Kiszczak was able to choose with whom he will speak. He did not choose Andrzej Gwiazda. He knew that Andrzej Gwiazda will not cooperate with him at all. But the second choice was Lech Wałęsa. Lech Wałęsa was a leader of a slightly smaller movement within Solidarity, but he was willing to talk. And soon after, the meeting came. The meeting was called Round Table, and where all the leaders of the ruling and all the leaders of the chosen opposition met together with representatives of Catholic Church, and they came into certain agreements. Now, this is already year 1989. So, they had several agreements. The first and the most meaningful one was the new election will be held, of which 70% will be of seats in the new parliament will be for the Communist Party, Socialist Party, and other smaller movements which were loyal to the government. Senate will be established. Position of a president will be established. President will be elected by parliament. And loads of power was given to the parliament, which is quite obvious. If you are guaranteed 70% of the parliament, you want the parliament to be the most powerful force in the new country. Apart of that, other movements were allowed to exist, mainly from the Solidarity movement, and the opposition was allowed to show themselves for 30 minutes a day in TV. Well, obviously back then there was only one public TV with 2 channels. There were others, numerous others, agreements on the round table. Some sound very humanistic, like judges cannot be removed, for instance, which is a very good rule. A judge shouldn't be removed when he makes his judgment. But the idea behind this one was that the judges were established by the communist oppressive regime, and they were members of that regime, which means that the judges will never be removed, which means that if you will ever try to judge the crimes of the so long system, it will be done by the judges who that system represent. Anyway, it was a step forward. And soon, the election came. And as we can imagine, Solidarity movement took all the seats available, which were available for them, which means those 30%. A new government was formed. The first non-communist prime minister, with vice prime minister was still General Kiszczak. But still, you know, you have the first prime minister which is not from the Communist Party. He had also a different vice prime minister, which we will show his acts later, the fellow who worked for the more economical change, then a PhD, currently a professor, Leszek Balcerowicz. After that government, there was, as we know, this wasn't the first free government. We still have 70% of Communist Party in the parliament. After that, there was a new election, a completely free this one. And that was the first prime minister of the completely free new parliament. Now, in this one, people were really allowed to vote as they please. He created the first government, and out of his quite short rule, he managed to, back it was 1993, he managed to ask for requirements of joining Poland into several international bodies, namely NATO, which was the North Atlantic Pact, which was very important for Polish safety, and European Economical Community. This flag is currently, there is a different name to that flag, but then it was only an economical community. And with NATO, it was a very new thing because we still had Russian troops existing in Poland. Previous prime ministers, namely Tadeusz Mazowiecki, didn't want to remove the Russian troops from Poland. They were quite happy with the existence because Tadeusz Mazowiecki was afraid of Germans. He thought that there is a possibility that Germany might use this opportunity to regain the eastern lands. This didn't happen, but we kept, thanks to that, we kept Russian troops for two more years. They've gone away anyway, so no harm done. The other changes were industrial. The first fellow who was approached by Polish government, then government of Mr. Rakowski, was this fellow, Jeffrey Sachs, a Harvard professor and an author of a plan for Latin American countries, which was to bring them into modern era. He wrote a plan for Poland. The plan was quite long, but the main things are low customs, around 20%, allow international investments, no more credit for those who bring losses, and position to renegotiate with Paris society, who was the creditors of Polish debt. Also, he made credited loans to be as expensive as possible. That was to stop inflation. And his last idea was to create a stock exchange. Now, low customs. This allows international trade to come into Poland, not only in the suitcases of small smugglers, but as a normal trade. But this brought together with expensive credit and loans, which was supposed to stop inflation, was having a result. This result was that foreign Western producers were allowed to have low interest rates. They were allowed to have a cheap credit. Polish producers, if there were any, they were not allowed to have a cheap credit because the credit had to be expensive to stop inflation. And then, in the same market, you have two products. One is privileged by cheap credit, one is discouraged by expensive credit. The gentleman who was chosen to put this plan into work was economist from the School of Central Planning, PhD Balcerowicz. He was a very bright fellow. He was allowed to study in America during the 80s. So he was chosen to prepare this plan. In the period of around 100 days, him and his collaborators, they prepared 11 laws, 11 new laws. Now, Mr. Wilczek prepared only one, but they prepared 11. And those laws were passed in the parliament. And again, we remember that this parliament is 70% communist. Those laws 11 laws were passed in the parliament within 10 days. 11 laws, 10 days. That includes Christmas break. I wonder how fast were those parliamentarians able to read. His main laws. Central bank will not finance state budget, which means no printing of new money, basically it. That was to stop inflation. Loans and credit rates have to be higher than inflation. Now, this is the exactly same thing which we just said. They have to be expensive. Now, this law worked also on the deals which were made before this law was passed. So the banks were able to put interest rates as high as they want on to every single customer of theirs. Full internal exchange of foreign currency, which means that you can buy dollars, you can sell dollars, you can buy Deutschmarks, you can sell Deutschmarks, but limited international exchange, which means that this is 1990, which means that if you want to, you are not allowed to bring foreign currency abroad other way than through the state agency. He also made unemployment legal. Now, unemployment was a crime during socialist time, but making unemployment legal meant that people were actually allowed to have a doll. Also, using the laws called Popivek, he put a huge tax on pay rise. So you may get a pay rise, but it will be taxed anyway, so there is no point. And that again was to stop inflation. The last thing was an anti-inflation anchor with a dollar. Now, US dollar was supposed to be exchanged with Polish zloty at a rate of 9,500 to 1. And that was in power till May 1991. During the 80s, US dollar was very highly overpriced in Poland. For US dollar, you were able to buy actually everything. It was outstandingly overpriced. It wasn't a legal source of, you were not allowed to pay with that, but everybody did, because dollar had a value and Polish zloty didn't. The result of that was when Balcerowicz put this anti-inflation anchor in January 1990, it worked the other way. It didn't stop the inflation. It made it bigger. Because dollar was worth so much So making a tight currency exchange with a dollar sounded like a good idea, but it was overpriced. This overpricing was hidden. It worked the other way. His reforms revealed few things about 1980s economy. First thing which they revealed was inflation. Inflation was hidden during 80s. It was general planning and general statistics were used to hide inflation. Money was worthless, we pretend it isn't. When he started his reforms, the inflation was over 600% in a year. It's outstanding. You can see that at the end of the table, when you have seen 1993, those little small boxes, it's still over 35%. 35% in a year, it's dreadful. And what also happened in the early 1990s, they managed to put stock exchange. They used the old building, which used to be the central bureau of the Communist Party, and they changed it to stock exchange. This is how it looks now, today. A nice social realist building, very massive, very big, with those advertisements on top. The other type of change which Poland faced after 1989 was social. And again, as we go into unemployment, for instance, it wasn't, we can see that it started not as a result of the reform. It started as a result of a previous crisis. Unemployment was present in Poland for the all 1980s. It was just hidden. People were going to work to stand because nobody was able to supply the workplace. For instance, you go to a factory and you don't have enough metal to produce the thing which you do make. So you stand, but you still get a salary. So you are not working, you just get a salary. It's not a real employment. This change, this going into free market, revealed that. But because they used this anchor, and because they made such a huge problems with getting a credit for Polish companies, unemployment starting to grow. Nowadays, unemployment in Poland, I believe it's more or less the same as it is back here in 1990s. It's hidden. Again, it's hidden because people are working on without any agreements, or they are working with very little pay. But more or less, it is the same as it was in the 1990s. The other change, which I remember from those times, was a huge crime wave. I was shocked with the crime wave. I was very, very upset about it. I thought, and then this is my real thoughts. I thought, well, those guys, the communists, they were able to get a grip on that. No, it was just lies. In the media, in the newspapers, and in the communist television, there was no crime. The crime existed, and existed big time. Prostitution, ransoms, organized crime, it was all there. It was just not in the newspapers. Poland brought free media, which were informing about crime. This can be proven by a simple thing. In 1980, when Solidarity appeared, when there was this renaissance of freedom, a brief renaissance of freedom, all the media, public media, were full of crime to make people fear. So people will be afraid. We have a change. We have fear. The change might be bad. It is not true. The crime was there. The crime was there before. It was just hidden. And the other change which we had was the spiritual change. Catholic Church was the stronghold of freedom in socialist Poland. You were able to go to a mass, and it depends from the church to which you went, but if you went to a church, you might hear something about how things should be, how we are free no matter what the circumstances are. Such a priests, which were, this priest is Ksiądz Jerzy Popiełuszko, he was the chaplain of Solidarity, were targeted by secret police. Ksiądz Popiełuszko was murdered, and he is currently regarded as a Catholic saint martyr. The other priests, but he was murdered before the change, in the 1980s. The priest, this is Priest Niedzielak. Priest Niedzielak was a chaplain of Home Army during Second World War. He was a chaplain of cutting families in times where nobody was allowed to speak about cutting. He initiated things like a mass for the homeland. He was a stronghold of Polish patriotism through religion. He was murdered in his own house in January 1989. Now this is in January 1989, government already approached Western economists looking for a solution. And during the same time, secret police is murdering priests in their homes. This is Ksiądz Suchowolec, who was also a chaplain of Solidarity and who was also murdered by an arsonist in his own home. And he died in January 1989, when government was looking for the help from the Western economists, and when they were starting talks with the opposition. And he died just then. During roundtable talks, one of the members appealed for 1 minute of silence to commemorate Priest Niedzielak and Priest Suchowolec. This part was not emitted by the public television. After the change, Pope John Paul came again to Poland, then free country, then free parliament. And I remember the thing which he said: "What have you done with your freedom?" Because when he came after this gap, he saw a country which was indulged in consumption, which is understandable, because when you have nothing for a period of 10 years, you want to start buying. But then he also saw that people abandoned spirituality, that they needed spirituality only in the times of oppression, in the times of welfare, moderate welfare. Spirituality wasn't needed anymore. He also noticed that whom we choose are the people who promise us the more consumption, they don't promise our progress. Now, going to a conclusion, what I think about the change of 1989. I strongly believe that this change didn't end yet. It didn't end. We all think of it, and I did think of that myself, like in the past, that there was a round table and we did that and we didn't do that. But no, it's still going. It's not as fast, but it's still going. When General Kiszczak was sentenced for his crimes, he got a suspended. He was suspended for 2 years. He got 2 years suspended for murdering 16 people. So some things are not done. Okay, out of Polish industry, most of it using those privileges by Western companies were bought by Western companies, and they are not Polish. So we have to still rebuild Polish industry. It's not done yet. So there are loads to do. And thank you very much. If anybody has any questions, I will be happy to answer.
I would be thinking, and I would ask that question. Do you think that the mentality pre-change still persists in the minds of people in Poland? Do they still kind of have the same frame of mind when thinking about things as it was before before the Solidarity won the elections?
Yes. Communism destroyed Polish mentality very, very much. It divided Poles into single people. We are atomized, and we are atomized again. There is no such a thing as social thinking, of thinking about ourselves as a community. We think of our own, I am. We are still afraid to speak freely in the public about our beliefs. We are still afraid to talk in public about ourselves, and we don't join in bigger groups. Volunteering in Poland is very uncommon, as working for free is regarded as something not normal. That is rooted back in the communist ideas, when they believed that everybody will be working for free. So now nobody wants to do that anymore. So it will take several generations, not just one movement, one election, several elections. That's too little. We need several generations in which we will work just like our ancestors in the 19th century, when after fallen uprisings they started to work from the very bottom. Because if the building is destroyed, you have to start from the bottom.
And I think it takes also the time for people to travel around and see that there is a quality and there is power in even in volunteering, just to tackle on it, to see it as something that can be of a value. And I think there are several generations have to leave Poland as well and live outside and get the experience of the foreign countries as well to bring it back. And well, it is happening, I'm not saying it's not, but I just say that it is few generations, as you say, to change the mindset of people and just let them feel comfortable.
Traveling abroad is very a good idea. Traveling abroad brings you new ideas. It shows you where you are. It shows you how things can be done. For me, moving to Ireland was a brilliant experience. The things which I understood here are enormous. On the other hand, exporting 2 million young workforce over abroad is not a good idea for the industry. So we should be able to find somewhere in between, because sending 2 million young people to work outside of the country, pay taxes elsewhere, and enrich the other countries with them, most of us will not return to Poland. Okay? So we should be able to both travel, to bring new experiences with us, but not too permanent.
Just query about this guy called Andrzej Gwiazda.
Yes.
I never heard about him, and he looks like he's Wałęsa was probably the least smartest one of those two. So I was wondering what the other one was doing.
Andrzej Gwiazda was a leader of the main part of the Solidarity. if you would refer back in the 1988, who is the leader of Solidarity, most of people would show Andrzej Gwiazda. Him and his wife were creating a group which was called by Polish secret police, back then was called Gwiazdozbiór. They were, both him and Lech Wałęsa, they were close collaborators, and obviously they weren't close collaborators after the round table. Andrzej Gwiazda strongly believes in communist relations of Lech Wałęsa, and Lech Wałęsa doesn't like him anymore. But definitely, in the 1980s, the main person for the Solidarity movement was Andrzej Gwiazda.
But did he do anything after the...
No. No. He didn't take a part in the round table. Some of his group did, like Jan Olszewski, for instance, who first denied round table, but then he joined, as being a lawyer, he joined a commission for law. The same was with another party, which was Kongres Polski Niepodległej, with Leszek Moczulski, who first denied round table and then joined in. The most famous current politician who first denied round table would be Bronisław Komorowski. He denied round table. He was a close collaborator. In 1989, Bronisław Komorowski was a close collaborator of Antoni Macierewicz. And he strongly opposed the round table. It was after that, when he became the minister in Hanna Suchocka government, when he was talked into that the round table was a good thing. Now you wouldn't tell, would we?
What do you think? Why do you think one of the richest people in Poland have a connection with Secret Service, like, you know, Leszek?
Oh, it is very simple. Because of that anchor. You know, for instance, this anchor of 9,500 of zloty to $1. Now, the anchor was made that this will not be devaluated at more than 10% per year. Imagine, this thing was kept a secret, which those who knew the secret had the biggest advantage. Example, you take a credit in Western countries, anywhere, preferably in US dollars. You bring this money into a Polish bank, which will give you an interest of something like 90% because of the huge inflation. But this inflation is not touching dollar because it was overpriced already. So you actually gain this of that 90% with that anchor, which tells you that you will lose only 10%, not more. You will get 80% back in a year. Knowledge of the changes. When they eventually allowed trade of currency everywhere, only one fellow immediately, within a night, because this again was kept a secret, but within a nightfall, just one fellow was having an exchange point on every single border. What a great luck he must have. Now this is a thing which didn't change very much in nowadays. Last famous selling of Czech company, when a company was sold to a private investor and who put it on stock exchange, and then this company, without any restructurization, without any investment, without even changing the chairmans, this company was worth twice more. What a great luck he has. Or somebody made a mistake putting a price on the stock. We will know, we will not know.
So now I just wonder, what do you think about the Balcerowicz reform?
I do believe it wasn't done properly. I do believe it was done too little, too late. He could have done more. He could have put more free market. The most of Polish problems which we now have because this change was done in a way that the political class of then communist Poland was in charge of that. 60 banks appeared out of nowhere in 1990. But all those banks were ruled by the people from the old system. It wasn't right. It wasn't done right. Opening of a market to foreign money and not giving a credit to your own companies? Ooh, that's very bad. That's very bad.
Thanks so much, and I believe you do too. Thank you very much, and hope to see you again. What I wish to invite you to is tomorrow we're having a Polish Arts and Crafts and Food Fair here in the Hunt, just outside the main gallery. And at 1 o'clock in the same place, we are going to talk about gender in social and cultural practices, feminism and its complex pathways. And lecture will be given by Alexandra Dera, PhD from Nicholas Copernicus University and Trinity College Dublin. So if you're by any chance available tomorrow at 1 o'clock, you're more than welcome to talk about female stuff, and not so much maybe political, but definitely interesting. And tomorrow there's also arts and crafts workshops for children, session 1 from 12 o'clock till 1, session 2 from 1:30 to 3 o'clock, and we will be, the theme of the workshop is decoupage and art on Irish stones and wood. So bring your little ones to enjoy themselves while you shop around and listen to the lecture. Thank you so much for coming, and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.